The biker was a man known for his leather jacket patched with the red and white colors of the Hells Angels. He had ridden through storms, through deserts, through dark highways where only the hum of his Harley gave him comfort. But now he was not fighting rivals, not dealing with the law, not living the wild nights of the Brotherhood. He was fighting something no engine could outrun, his little daughter's sickness. Doctors had said the girl's lungs were weak, her body failing her day by day. Machines kept her breathing. Tubes carried food to her stomach. He had never felt so powerless, and for a man who built his identity on control, power, and fearlessness, this was a punishment harder than chains. One evening, after spending hours at the hospital staring at her pale face, he left without telling anyone. He rode aimlessly until the road curved toward a small town. At the center of the town square stood a weathered statue of the Virgin Mary, her hands outstretched, her face carved soft and sorrowful. The biker pulled the Harley close, engine echoing against the stone walls of the chapel nearby, and dismounted. He didn't believe in saints. He didn't believe in miracles. But that night something cracked inside him. He stepped toward the statue, leather boots echoing on the pavement. His hands shook. He clenched them into fists as if to fight the marble figure, but his voice came out broken instead. "Please," he whispered hoarsely, "she's all I got. Don't take her." No one was around. The town slept. A drunk stumbled out of a bar and didn't notice him. The biker lowered his head. His body, filled with tattoos of skulls and flames, looked small before the cold figure. He had fought wars on the streets, yet here he was begging to stone. The wind rose. He thought it was coincidence. But a faint scent of roses passed through the air, a smell that had no business being in that empty plaza. His head lifted, eyes narrowing. The statue's face seemed to glisten in the pale moonlight as if fresh tears ran down the stone. He rubbed his eyes, cursed, then stepped back. The ground trembled lightly beneath his boots, just for a second. He staggered, grabbing his bike's handle. The air grew heavy, charged like a thunderstorm, yet the sky was clear. He looked at the statue, heart pounding faster than during any brawl or chase. The Virgin's lips seemed to part. A whisper, softer than the rustle of leaves, reached him. He couldn't tell if it was in his head or out loud. "She will not be lost." He froze. His breathing stopped. He backed up, shaking his head. No, I'm hearing things." But the air still carried the rose scent. And though the plaza was empty, he felt the weight of presence, like unseen eyes watching with sorrow and compassion. He mounted his bike fast, started the engine, and roared away. He told himself he was going mad, that grief had driven him into hallucinations. But deep down, something had shifted. For the first time in years, the outlaw felt something like hope. The next morning at the hospital, his daughter's condition stabilized. Doctors shook their heads, saying they had expected her to decline further during the night. Instead, her breathing was stronger, her color returning. They couldn't explain it. The biker sat beside her bed, staring at her fragile chest rising and falling. His mind returned again and again to the statue, the whisper, the scent of roses. He didn't tell the doctors. He didn't tell his brothers in the club. They would laugh, call him soft, say the streets had finally broken him. But the thought haunted him. Had the Virgin Mary really heard him? Days turned into weeks. Each night, he rode back to that plaza. Sometimes he prayed. Sometimes he only sat in silence. Other times he cursed, angry at the world, at God, at himself. But the statue remained, calm and silent, as if waiting. Then one night, something else happened. A group of young men, drunk and reckless, staggered into the square. They laughed, throwing bottles at walls, shouting curses. When they spotted the biker kneeling before the statue, they mocked him. "Look at the tough guy crying to a stone woman," one of them shouted. The biker ignored them. His fists tightened, but he stayed still. He had come to the statue not as an outlaw, but as a father. But the young men weren't finished. One of them picked up a rock and hurled it at the Virgin Mary's face. The stone cracked against the statue with a dull thud. The biker shot up, rage exploding in his chest. "Don't you dare!" he roared, stepping between them and the statue. The punks laughed again, circling him. "What's she gonna do, huh? Save you?" But then it happened. The air turned heavy once more, charged like before a storm. The rose scent filled the square so strongly that even the drunken men noticed. They froze, confused. A low hum vibrated through the ground. The statue glowed faintly, pale light flowing like moonlight over its surface. The crack from the rock sealed before their eyes. The punks stumbled back in terror, dropping bottles. "What the hell?" one stammered. The biker stood rooted, chest heaving. His eyes widened as the virgin stone gaze shifted slightly downward, her eyes locking with his for the briefest second. The young men screamed and fled into the night, too afraid to look back. The biker stayed, unable to move. The glow faded, leaving only the ordinary statue again. He sank to his knees, trembling, pressing his forehead against the cold stone base. Tears soaked his beard. He didn't care who saw. The outlaw, the fighter, the man who had lived by the code of strength, now wept openly. And somewhere in the hospital that very night, his daughter woke fully for the first time in months, whispering her father's name. The road outside the small church grew darker as storm clouds gathered, but inside the candlelight flickered steady, painting the rough face of the biker in hues of gold and shadow. He sat there longer than he thought he would, his knees stiff from kneeling, his calloused hands clenched in silent appeal. The Virgin Mary statue seemed almost alive, the delicate carved features lit in a way that felt watchful. For years he had scoffed at prayers, mocked the very idea of saints or miracles, but tonight the world felt tilted. His daughter's sickness had drained his strength, stripped away the armor of bravado and left him with nothing but fear. He whispered again, though his voice cracked, the words tumbling out in broken rhythm. The empty church echoed them back, as if the walls themselves were listening. At that moment, a sudden gust of wind rattled the old doors and snuffed out 2 candles near the altar. The biker's heart slammed in his chest. He turned his head sharply, expecting to see someone coming in, another parishioner maybe, or the priest. But the doors hadn't moved, the hinges creaked with no visible touch. Then, just as quickly, the 2 candles reignited, their flames burning stronger than before, taller, brighter, like torches. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, muttered under his breath, unsure if exhaustion was twisting his vision. The statue seemed to shimmer. Not move, not literally come alive, but shimmer like heat rising from asphalt. The biker froze, his breath lodged in his throat. He stared, every instinct screaming to look away, yet he couldn't. Something invisible pressed into the air, thickening it, wrapping the room in a strange weight. His skin prickled beneath his leather jacket. Then, faint and delicate, the sound of a child's laughter echoed faintly, bouncing through the empty pews. It wasn't mocking, nor frightening. It was soft, like his daughter's giggle when she was healthy, when she used to sit on his shoulders and tug at his beard. His eyes burned as tears welled, and he whispered her name into the still air. A sudden knock echoed against the heavy wooden doors, loud and urgent. The biker stood, nearly stumbling, his boots scraping against the floor. He approached slowly, suspicion twisting his gut. Nobody knew he was here. Nobody followed him. He pulled the door open and found an old woman standing in the rain. Her clothes were ragged, a scarf wrapped tightly around her head, her hands trembling as she clutched a bundle wrapped in cloth. Her eyes, piercing, gray, strangely clear, locked onto his. Without greeting, without hesitation, she stepped past him into the church. The biker's instinct was to stop her, demand answers, but something about her presence silenced him. She shuffled toward the altar and placed the bundle beneath the Virgin Mary's statue. She then turned, her voice low, roughened by years, yet sharp as a blade. She said, "Your daughter is not lost. But the price of her healing will test you." The biker's jaw clenched. He wanted to yell, to demand what she meant, but he felt rooted to the floor. The old woman lit another candle, murmuring words he didn't understand, then glanced back at him. "Go to her tonight. Hold her hand when the fever rises. Do not let go, no matter what you see, no matter what you hear." Before he could speak, before he could press her for more, the woman slipped past him, out into the storm, vanishing as if swallowed by the night. He rushed to the door, stepping out into the rain, scanning the empty road. She was gone, not a trace, not even footprints in the mud. When he turned back, the bundle she had left beneath the statue was gone as well. Only the extra candle remained, its flame strong and steady. Shaken, he returned to his bike, his mind spinning. He rode fast, reckless, the rain stinging his face as the tires roared against the slick pavement. His thoughts kept circling back to the old woman's words. He reached the hospital, storming through the sterile hallways, his boots heavy on the tile. Nurses glanced at him warily, but he ignored their looks. He entered his daughter's room, the sight of her pale face slicing through him like a knife. Machines beeped softly, and Four dripped, her small chest rising and falling shallowly. He dropped into the chair beside her bed, his rough hand enveloping her tiny one. He remembered the old woman's warning, "Do not let go." As the night deepened, her fever spiked. Sweat coated her skin, her body trembling. The biker clutched her hand tighter, whispering to her though she couldn't respond. Suddenly, the air in the room grew colder. The lights flickered once, then again, then held steady. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the walls, through his bones. The girl's eyelids fluttered, and then, with a voice far too strong for her frail body, she spoke a single word. "Daddy." The biker's heart slammed against his ribs. She hadn't spoken in days, barely breathed without help, and now she was looking straight at him, her eyes wide and glowing faintly in the dim light. He squeezed her hand, fighting tears, but then her voice changed, layered, echoing, carrying tones that weren't hers. She whispered words in a language he didn't understand, her gaze fixed somewhere above him. The biker wanted to pull away, fear clawing at him, but he remembered the warning, "Do not let go." The walls of the hospital room seemed to ripple, the shadows stretching unnaturally. Shapes moved in the corners of his vision, twisting, flickering, vanishing when he tried to focus. The girl's body arched, her hand gripping his with impossible strength, nails digging into his skin. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let go, whispering to her over and over, telling her he was there, that he wouldn't leave. Then, just as suddenly, everything stilled. The lights steadied. The hum faded. His daughter's breathing eased, her body relaxing against the sheets. She blinked, her eyes normal again, her small hand softening in his grip. She whispered, weak but clear, "I love you, Daddy." He buried his face in her hair, sobbing quietly, his leather jacket damp from a hospital's chill and his own tears. The machines now read steady signs, her fever breaking before his eyes. Nurses rushed in, shocked at the sudden stabilization, whispering among themselves. But the biker knew. He knew the old woman's words had been truth. Something had happened in that room, something no doctor could explain, something that began when he knelt before the Virgin Mary and begged. Yet deep in his gut, he also knew the old woman had not spoken in riddles for nothing. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. The morning after his prayer at the Virgin Mary statue, the biker woke with a strange calm in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. His daughter was still asleep in the hospital, machines humming, but the doctors had noted her breathing seemed steadier. He lit a cigarette outside the hospital doors, staring at the sky, and muttered that maybe the statue had heard him. He wasn't a man of churches, never was, but something had shifted. Later that day, the nurses rushed into his daughter's room. The monitors beeped in patterns they hadn't seen in weeks. Her fever had broken, her body showing signs of fighting back. The doctors were puzzled, saying they hadn't expected any change so soon. The biker leaned against the wall, gripping his leather vest with trembling hands. He remembered the way he had dropped to his knees in front of that Virgin Mary statue, asking for something he didn't deserve, begging like a broken man. Now, it seemed like something had answered. He kept quiet, didn't tell the others from his club about it, but he returned to that statue every night. Rain, wind, cold, it didn't matter. He stood there, helmet under his arm, tattoos gleaming under streetlights, whispering words he never thought he'd speak. Each time he went back, his daughter's condition showed small improvements. The nurses started calling it remarkable progress. He just called it survival. One night, as he stood in front of the Virgin Mary, he noticed candles lit by strangers, names scribbled on paper folded at the base. He realized he wasn't alone. Other broken people came here, pouring out their pain to stone, hoping for something bigger than themselves. For the first time in his life, he felt part of something beyond the roar of engines and the brotherhood of the road. But the shocking part came later, when his daughter opened her eyes. It was late evening, the room dim, and she looked around with weak confusion before locking eyes on him. She whispered, "Daddy," with a cracked voice that made his chest collapse with relief. Tears streamed down his face, unashamed. He rushed out, found the nearest payphone, and called the hospital priest, a man he had once laughed at. The priest listened quietly, then said sometimes miracles come in strange shapes, even for men who think they're too far gone. The biker didn't know if it was a miracle or luck, but he knew one thing. He would never forget the night he begged a stone statue and felt something listening back.